All right, it's time to start our cartoon jumble exercise. We are going to look for line art. So we're going to start with Google Chrome, inspired by Arturo Herrera's compositions using Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and making them transformed enough to be his own compositions. We're going to look up our own line art. So I am going to use He-Man. And we're just going to look for an image search. But now, instead of just using images as reference that we draw from ourselves, we're going to use the actual pixels we find. So the resolution of the images is really important to the quality. So the first thing I do is go to Search Tools, and I'm going to limit the size of my results to larger than, let's do 6 megapixels for this project. So that's one way I can limit my results. All of these now are at least, close to 2,000 by 3,000 pixels. This one's fun. All right. Next, I don't want color images. I want just the line art images. So I want coloring book kind of things. So I'm going to limit the color to being just black and white. And that's going to help quite a bit. And then, if I want to, I can limit the type as well to be line drawing. Now, the only danger of using all these limitations in search tools is that some images will fall through the cracks, that won't have all the right image tags attached to them. But if you have a lot of results, and I have quite a few here, I don't need to worry about that so much. So now I know all of these are big enough, but I want to check them by right-clicking them and opening them in new tabs. I can do it a few ways. I can left-click, look at them there, and then under View Image, say Open Link in New Tab. And then I can make sure that they're not just a bad scan. But no, this is some nice, clean line art. Then I go back to my search. I'm also going to look for things that are self-contained, very much like coloring book pages. Because we're going to overlap them all together and make our own composition. And please ignore any inappropriate search results you might find. If this weren't a college class, I'd have worries about using Google image search, because you never know what you're going to find. But especially when you put man in your search criteria. And then there's a Bambi in here for some reason. That might be fun to use. Now, the reason I ask you to search for one kind of criteria is that the line qualities will be fairly similar. But you can use any reference you like. All right, let's see. You need at least 5. So once you've had them and you've checked them and they look good, you're just going to drag and drop them onto your desktop. I do the desktop because it's a nice big target. Now this one I'm actually not going to use because you see it's a high resolution image, but it's very degraded. This is interesting. Let's see. Yeah, it's pretty degraded too. That's nice and clean. Well, where was the first one? There it is. Okay, so I've got 5 images now. You can always do more, but we need to at least use 5. I can minimize Chrome. I'm done with it for now. All of these images I can move into my cartoon jumble folder. So if any time I don't finish using them all, I'm not doing the right things, at least I have them all here. And I can see right from their tags that 4 of them are JPEG images and 1 of them is a PNG. All right, now I'm going to take my favorite image and open it with Photoshop. And I can close and save if I need to save my past Photoshop files. If you close it and you haven't saved it, it will give you that as an option. All right, so now I have one file open. I am going to shrink my Photoshop window and use Command- to zoom out a little bit so that I can see the desktop and Photoshop. And I am going to drag and drop my other images on top. Some will be too big, some will be too small. As they come in, you'll see they have this big X. You just hit return to place them. And you'll notice that they come in as new layers. And they're not just any layers, they're what are called smart layers. We'll learn a little bit more about that. Okay, the other thing you notice is that because they're JPEGs, most of them, they cover up everything that's underneath. So in order to make them more like transparencies so I can merge them all together, I need to convert them from normal mode, right here in the layer window, to what's called multiply mode. It pretty much tells it to ignore all the white so that anything that's darker than white shows up. And I can do that for all of them except for my background layer. Convert them all to multiply except for the background. So now that just looks like a mess. And it doesn't quite have the elegance I'm going for. Right? Because I haven't done anything really. I've just collected reference. So the creative part of this project is using the transform tools, using your eraser tool. And I'll show you how to erase with the lasso. And to make composition that you're more interested in. And I do it one at a time. So I'm going to turn off all the layers except for my background and the first image. And then, clicking on that first image, I'm going to hit Command-T. And that allows me to stretch it. It allows me to rotate it. If I right-click within the transform box, it even allows me to do things like flip it horizontally. Because I already have a sword on that side. Maybe I want the sword on this other side. And then I can hit return. Then I can go to the next one, turn it on. It's on multiply, hit Command-T. Play with its size. And orientation. Take the next one, Command-T, maybe flip the negative here. And then my last one. Now this last one is in many ways kind of the coolest one. So I'm going to leave that mostly intact. Now if I just have my first and last, I'll notice that my last one has some problems with it. It's not just perfectly black and white. It's got this little remnant of a scan. So in order to erase from it, I need to do a few things. If I try to use the eraser tool right on that layer right now, it won't let me do it because it's a smart object. It's a smart layer I brought in. So what a smart layer means, and it has this little icon in the corner of the layer window, it means that it's referencing another file. And you only get those in Photoshop when you drag and drop a file in. So it's showing you the file in Photoshop, but it's referencing an outside file to show it to you. That has a lot of advantages that we're going to make use of later. But for right now, it's a disadvantage. So instead, you can rasterize it. And I just did that by hitting OK when it gave me the warning. But to rasterize something automatically, you just right-click on the layer, and then you say rasterize. And you'll see I'll get rid of the little smart icon. And then you can edit it as you please. You can add color, you can delete. So I can use my eraser, if I want, now on this layer, and get rid of that. But sometimes I want to erase really specific things. And using the eraser itself might not be accurate enough. So another way we can erase is using the Lasso Tool, which in many ways is my favorite tool in Photoshop. And this works really well with your stylus as well. You're just simply going to draw selections. It's like cutting out paper and then just hitting delete. So if I want just this corner cut out, I can do that. Remember, it's just the one layer. If I want this sword to show, I can cut it out there. And then on my background layer, I'm just going to try to make these two layers look good together. What if I want, like all within this leg, all of that to be blank? What I can do is I can use the magic wand tool with contiguous turned on. These are all things we can experiment with. And you see on my background layer, that will select all the contained pixels, the white pixels within his leg. This gets a little complex, but we'll get used to it. Then I go back to my top layer, I select it, and I'm going to hit delete now, and it will delete all those pixels that I selected from the other layer, which is a whole lot easier than using the eraser tool to kind of clear that all out. It's important to know I didn't paint anything. In this exercise, you're not allowed to paint any pixels. You're not allowed to paint white, you're not allowed to paint black. You have to use what's there, distort it, and take it away to come up with your own composition. Now, what if I want to change the background layer a little bit? So if I want to erase from that, it will just look slightly different. If I try to use the eraser tool on the background layer, if my default background is white, like it is here, then no problem. It will go right to white. I tend to always get rid of eyes when I'm doing cartoon jumbles, so that they're more visible as shapes. But if I go to the background layer and I use the lasso tool, let's say I don't want this boot, and I hit delete, instead of just filling it in or getting rid of it, because it's a background layer, it needs to fill it in with something. And so I want it to fill it in with 100% white. Okay. What if I want to transform and rotate my background layer? Well, on the background, you can hit Command T, but not much will happen. So what you need to do first is select it all with the rectangular marquee. Once it's all selected, you can hit Command T, and then you'll get the transform box. And then you'll be able to rotate it, scale it, change it. If you don't want to deal with the differences that the background tool has, and honestly I don't blame you if that's the case, then I recommend simply double clicking on the background layer, and it will rename it as layer 0, and it will be a regular layer then that doesn't need to be filled with white. And then you could even set it to multiply, though that would only matter if you put it above other layers. All right, so now I'm able to mess with it. I can also use the lasso tool, instead of selecting the whole image, to just select part of the image. So for instance, I can move the image down, or I can or I can lasso just this sword and transform just that. If I wanted to. To deselect, Command D is a good shortcut within Photoshop for deselecting, or you can just click somewhere else with the lasso tool. All right. So now I'm going to kind of freely erase from both of these layers. And exercises, they're not going to be scored or graded on how great they are. But of course, we're always trying to make the strongest work we can. It's just to